So this is number 1544, dated 2nd of April to 15th of April 2021. This private eye, the fortnightly private eye, which is kind of available with some effort today. One is done. It's Easter parade, is Easter miracle. Includes Easter nest egg. Nowadays, I'm taking it sleazy. That is the kind of correct update on David Cameron, who has been acting as a tout and a peddler of lies for an Australian to get money from the Saudi. What's his name? Now, this is a tricky one. This one is heading to a short reference to Johnson and Arcuri. And the headline is Arcuri reveals, or heading is Arcuri reveals Boris Johnson was a generous lover. Within brackets, particularly with public money. And there are these bubbles to the pictures of them together, Arcuri and Johnson. And the bubble on Arcuri says, we had nicknames. I called him Alexander the Great. And Johnson says, I called her when I wanted a quick. Now, it's an incomplete sentence. And there is this take on the Boris Johnson having this adultery in his family home on the sofa. So those are the two things that catch the eye. This is only in the afternoon. I mean, 21 hours now. So it's not long since we obtained this copy of the eye, the campaign. And there is a complicated, convoluted kind of typically anti-Muslim narrative by private eye on the social media. And I'm not going to even read that because it is so offensive and dishonest. They are using the current so-called campaign against the current Burmese coup, military coup, to peripherally refer to Facebook's failures to stop the anti-Rohingya videos and propaganda during the genocide. So it's not a direct, genuine acknowledgement of the Rohingya, on the genocide of the Rohingyas. And there is this anti-Muslim piece against the parents in Batley West Yorkshire for the against the parents and guardians protesting against the cartoon. Now, in Croydon Council, there is this ongoing kind of coverage of the Croydon Council corruption. But as we have been saying on the facts of the contents of the Rotten Boroughs column in Private Lie, they don't get it. They are not at all up to speed, and the kind of timidity and the refusal to tell the truth about the crooks in Croydon Council continues to include the fact that Private Lie doesn't get it about the criminality being promoted by the anti-Labour party campaigners who want the Croydon Council to be made even more corrupt by foisting an elected mayor. So instead of exposing the role of the Inside Croydon, which is really promoting the so-called campaign for an elected mayor in Croydon, Private Eye is giving Inside Croydon, still giving Inside Croydon credibility, which it doesn't, credit, which it doesn't deserve. And Private Lie also continues to hide the details of all the legal things that it kind of tickles about. It doesn't give the even 1% of the legal texts or the contents about things that are supposedly about the courts of the criminal, corrupt, racist courts. And this reluctance to give the adequate texts and contextual references and details about so-called legal actions is evident in this piece as well. On page 9, which is headed Barrier Methods, and it's talking about the cabinet office team in the Boris Johnson fronted government last week confronted with a list of 24 human and equality rights breaches compiled by the online disability news service. And those breaches range from fatal decisions at the outset and the discharging untested hospital patients into care homes to more recent attempts to initially put disabled people in sixth place in the priority queue for vaccination, and so on. So it doesn't actually give the facts about the role of any tier of the so-called court system. And it is nowhere more evident in the first item, the very first item that is printed on page 7, immediately underneath the private eye mast, which is headed That's Reach. Whitehall is the name of the street where many of the central government departments' offices were based, and after that name, like Fleet Street or number 10 Downing Street, Whitehall has become used as a synonym for the UK's central government departments and bureaucracies. So it says Whitehall can move pretty fast when it comes to exonerating one of its own. Within 3 days of asking David Cameron about his lobbying on behalf of Granseal, the registrar of consultant lobbies, Harry Rich, last week cleared the ex-prime minister of doing so without registering as a lobbyist. The finding was based on detailed information and assurances provided. This is detailed, is the starting of the detail. This is a quote within quotes. This is saying detailed information and assurances provided, unquote, by Cameron that he was an employee of Grenseal, which would make his role something of an exception as a senior public figure turned part-time advisor to a company. Clearly, that is one example of Cameron lying, because in order to avoid scrutiny and accountability, Cameron termed himself as an employee, which would mean that he was not lobbying when he was lobbying. The relevant regulations have a simple definition of an employee, quote, an individual who works under a contract of employment, unquote. While the registrar's summary of his investigation mentioned 3 letters from Cameron, the contract didn't feature as one of the 3 letters. And then it asked, did he, Harry Rich, see it? The registrar will not comment further on this concluded investigation, was all his spokesperson would say. Now, this is absolutely pathetic. This is not giving anything, because there is a series of criminal offenses committed by Cameron there. that he lied. He lied and changed his status as an employee in order to avoid having to answer and be held to account for his behavior and role as a lobbyist. That is the main crime in there that Cameron has committed, but private lie is not focusing on that. Well, it's not focusing on that in the central way that it should do. So we shall be continuing with the papers today, review of the papers today. But before we do that, we have a post as a look at some of the posters, also known as the Morning Star. Today's poster of the Communist Party Morning Star so it's a critical headline, of course. It's a critical headline on the so-called watchdog clearing the Metropolitan Police of violence and misconduct allegation against the Metropolitan Police, which attacked the peaceful protesters at the peaceful Sarah Everard morning vigil. And the writer is Bethany Riley. A police watchdog has been accused of rubber stamping the Metropolitan Police's shameful handling of the Clapham Common vigil by concluding that officers acted appropriately. That is the headline, and we're not going to read any more of that item. And the weekend one shows that Mancap, the charity, is being cruel and refusing money that it owes to carers to the tune of 400 million across the sector. That is the Mancap. Remember, it's a charity. Remember, our theme has been that most of the well-funded charities in this country, we didn't include in the previous references any mention of Mancap. We did mention Shelter, RSPCA, and a few others, but not Shelter. Sorry, not Mancap. And there is another kind of celebration by the Morning Star that women in Asda Union, Asda kind of supermarket, won a pay fight. And the Monday's Morning Star, Monday the 29th of March, asked the question, that a former trade union official and Labour Party MP, John Spella, spied against trade unions to help Margaret Thatcher. So he's been asked to clarify his role, whether he did or he didn't. etc. But whether he did or did not, whether he actually explains or offers the clarification he's been asked to offer, doesn't make any difference at all. Because when the current so-called leader of the Labour Party, not just an MP, is behaving like he's dead politically, I mean, spying by one MP doesn't actually compare as being as serious, because the Starmer role is completely killing off the Labour Party and killing off democracy. Like this one, on Tuesday, yesterday's Morning Star shows that he's being asked to step up. And Friday, March the 26th, the Morning Star says that Johnson must end his NHS pay insult. So that's I don't want to call him PM for reasons already stated, but just for anyone who hasn't watched that one, calling him PM actually elevates Johnson to a level that he doesn't deserve based on his dysfunction and dishonesty and the serial lying and racism. So COVID Act, our rights at stake, ministers to vote on extending powers which will curtail rights. That is the Morning Star of March the 25th. Now, to get hold of the Morning Star, this headline and these kind of posters, our organization, our campaign, spent more than £100 today to get hold of these things. More than £100, well more than £100, our campaign. And there is this Shrewsbury campaign, Shrewsbury Pickers. Now, I'll come to that in a second. That's on the 24th of March, last Wednesday, today, a week ago. And it says, victory after 50 years, Shrewsbury convictions overturned. Now, this is such an important kind of headline and the poster that I shall read the first paragraph. The Shrewsbury 24, that is 24 people who were convicted of something very stupid because they were picketing, lawfully picketing, and they were convicted. So let's read the first three paragraphs. The Shrewsbury 24 celebrated a massive victory yesterday after their convictions of picketing nearly 50 years ago were quashed by the Court of Appeal. The court found that police destruction of original witness statements, notice what it says, police destruction of original witness statements made the verdicts which sent 6 trade unionists to prison unsafe. Workers who took industrial action during the 1972 National Builders strike for better wages and safety were charged with offenses including unlawful assembly, conspiracy to intimidate, and affray for picketing. At the time, many workers were injured or killed on unsafe sites. In 1973 and 74, 22 of the strikers were convicted and 6 were jailed, while 2 were acquitted. Lawyers representing 14 of the Shrewsbury 24, challenged the convictions of the Court of Appeal last month. 6 of the 14, including Des Warren, who was jailed for 3 years, have since died, and their appeals were continued by their relations. Yesterday, the Court of Appeal overturned the convictions of all 14 on the grounds that original witness statements had been destroyed. Announcing the verdict at the Royal Courts of Justice in London, Lord Justice Fulford said, "By the standards of today, what occurred was unfair to the extent that the verdicts cannot be upheld." In a statement after the ruling, actor Ricky Tomlinson, who was sentenced to 2 years imprisonment, said, "While it is right that these convictions are overturned, it's a sorry day for British justice. The reality is we should never have been standing in the dock. We were brought to trial at the apparent behest of the building industry bosses, the Conservative government, and ably supported by the secret state. This was a political trial, not just because of me and the Shrewsbury pickets, but was a trial of the trade union movement." Ends the quotation. Shrewsbury 24 campaign member Terry Renshaw, who renewed a suspended sentence, said, "We never thought that we would see this day when this miscarriage of justice was overturned. The Court of Appeal has acknowledged that we did not receive a fair trial, and the police and the prosecuting authorities used every trial trick in the book to secure guilty verdicts, even if it meant trampling over our rights and our manipulating the evidence." I should read that paragraph again because there is one word I think added, one word too many that have been added. No, this is the paragraph. "The Court of Appeal has acknowledged that we did not receive a fair trial. The police and the prosecuting authorities used every trick in the book to secure guilty verdicts, even if it meant trampling over our rights and manipulating the evidence." Now, this is the shortest way that this particular thing can be summarized here, but the reason I have read all of that instead of just the first paragraph is because it represents, it's not a Fleet Street paper, but it's a paper published from London by the Communist Party, and I call it the Morning Scar, because most of the stuff it publishes are either contradictions of the truth or are at conflict with the ordinary people who are actually campaigning in any situation or setting. And we shall be talking more about that in due course. And here is the Morning Scar of this Mondays. No, the last Monday, the March 22nd. And the headline gives the game away. "Police violence writ large on Anti-Racism Day. Campaign pushes for answers on why man died following custody." So that is again a reference to the judicial system and the role of the police. And It's written by Niall Christie, and it's similar, very similar to the other headlines in the Morning Star. This is the day after, Tuesday, the 23rd of March, which says that 2 million jobs on knife edge of extinction. Reforms, COVID loans, or almost 1 million farms could fold, Tories told. So that's the reluctantly published evidence and confession. Labour, National Health Service pay must rise after the COVID sacrifices. Well, that is again not very honest, because why do they want the sacrifices to be recognized after the end of the COVID? Okay, this is the, as we said, our campaign spent more than £100 today to get hold of the papers, including the paper on the Sunday. And the Sunday Times of March the 28th, the last Sunday, this issue number 10,255, led with the corruption and sleaze by David Cameron. Okay, now this is worth £100 and more. This is the kind of extent of the original diagnostic, world exclusive diagnosis that we do. This is a diagnostic, fact-checking, evidential service that we are providing without any paywall or subscription or anything. This is the report on Cameron the Crook. So the Cameron is actually featuring now in other reports, including in of course, the Guardian, which again has diluted the actual contents. And this one, although published on Sunday, is worth a read because the Private Lie has done something, as has the Guardian. And of course, the Times cartoon. The cartoon on the Times by Peter Brooks shows that Cameron took a fun-filled kind of holiday or trip to meet Mohammed bin Salman, acting as a lobbyist for the Australian crook, Grand Seal. And the crook and his wife are pictured as they received the CBE, as he received the CBE, and the Sunday Times is calling it an honor. Now, if the Sunday Times actually was morally behaving in this, they would never call it the honor. So we shall be talking more about the Sunday Times and the whole detailed report about David Cameron, the lying lobbyist, who changed his description from being a lobbyist, which was based on the facts of what he was doing, to an employee, so that he would avoid accountability, having to answer questions that arose from his illegal behavior. So we shall be coming to discuss those and updating on the role of Armless Council in neglecting the children, the 4 girls from Bethnal Green, And also we shall be updating on why the elected mayor was the disaster, the worst disaster in Tower Hamlets Council's entire existence since April 1965. And we shall be updating on the report, the racist package fronted by Tony Sewell and actually designed and conceived by Munira Mirza, who is of Pakistani origin, but is a completely corrupt right-wing fan of Johnson, and anti-Bangladeshi, anti-Muslim, anti-Pakistani, all the other things attached to her. And she's a racist stooge. So we shall be talking about all of those in the next edition.